So to begin this video right here, we're going to start with these two simple absolute value equations, right? What is the absolute value of negative 3? Positive 3, right? What's the absolute value of positive 3?
Negative 3.
No, it's also 3. Right? The absolute value, see, in order for us to understand absolute value, we need to know the definition of absolute value. You can just leave it there. So what is the absolute value? What is the definition of absolute value? It's the absolute distance from that value to 0. Okay? It's the absolute distance from that value to 0. Okay? So when we talk about distance, there is no such thing as negative distance, right? If you walk from here to Heber, how far are you walking? About 4 or 5 miles, right? But what if you walk from here to Heber backwards? It's the same thing. There's no such thing as negative distance, right? It doesn't matter if you're walking forward or backwards, it's still distance, and distance is positive. So absolute value, in a sense, when you take the absolute value of a negative number or a positive number, it's always going to be positive, the answer. Okay? Let's take a look at that in terms of a number line. So where is the absolute value of 3? Well, here's 3, and absolute value is that distance to 0. So if you go from that value 1, 2, 3, that's 3 units. So that's why the absolute value of 3 is 3. Now if you look at negative 3 is over here, and again, it's the distance from that value to 0. So you go 1, 2, 3, right? So again, absolute value of negative 3 is also 3. It doesn't matter which way you're traveling, distance is always positive. So the absolute value is always going to be positive. Do we understand that simple concept? Yes, we do. Okay, thank you. So what's the absolute value of 7? 7. What's the absolute value of negative 7? 7. What's the absolute value of 5? 5. Okay, guys, I'm not asking what's the opposite of 5. I'm saying what's the absolute value of 5. So if you were on the number line and you were at 5, and I say, how far is it from here to 0? How far is it from here to 0? 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So the absolute value of 5 is positive 5. Now if I say, what's the absolute value of negative 5? It's also 5. Because the distance from here to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's also 5. So absolute value is always going to be positive. Do we understand?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to something with equations. Let's solve the easiest type of absolute value equation. Okay? Here it is. The absolute value of x equals 3. Now, let's remind ourselves of something. Let's remember that the answer to any equation is the value that'll make it a true statement. Okay? So, like if I said x plus 2 equals 5, what's the answer? 3. Why is the answer 3 on this guy?
Because x equals 3.
Because if you plug in a 3, it'll be a true statement. 3 plus 2 equals 5. There is no other number that'll work right here that'll give you 5. Does that make sense? So the answer to any equation is the value that'll make it a true statement. Okay, so let me delete this one. Let's go back to this absolute value equation, the easiest type that there is. What value could I plug in right here that gives me the answer 3? It could be 3, right? Let me show you. The absolute value of 3 is 3, correct? So when I think about the answers to the black absolute value equation that we have right there, one answer is x equals 3. But is that the only answer? X equals negative 3 is also true. Why? Because when you do the absolute value of negative 3, that's also 3. Make sense? So, as you can see, there will always be two situations when solving an absolute value equation. There's going to be a positive situation and a negative situation, right? From this single absolute value equation, this is the easiest type there is, there's two situations. There's the positive situation and the negative situation. What does that mean? Well, you could plug in positive 3 and that'll be a true statement. You could also plug in a negative 3 and it'll be a true statement. So we need to understand that first, that on any absolute value equation, you're going to have two situations, a positive situation and a negative situation. Okay. Now, let me just ask you this. Instead of telling you, let me ask you, What is the difference between, let me actually erase these guys. Let me just scratch this out then. Let's forget about that. But let's look at that original equation. Tell me, what's the difference between the original absolute value equation and this first answer? Just verbally describe. What's the difference between this and this? This is identical to this? It looks exactly the same? What visually is difference between the two lines? That's right. The absolute values are gone, right? Okay. So think about this, guys. When you do a positive situation, you're going to write it exactly the way it is without the lines. When you do a negative situation, it's going to be the same thing. You're going to write it exactly the way it is without these lines, but what happened to the right side? What happened to the right side? It has a negative. Okay, so once again, on any absolute value equation, you're going to have to do two situations, a positive situation and a negative situation. How does a positive situation actually, how do you write it? You write it exactly the way it is without the sticks, as you said, right? Without the absolute values. You just write it without the absolute values. That's a positive situation. The negative situation, write it without the sticks, but change the right side of the equal sign to a negative. And that's what we're going to have to learn how to do. Check this out. So these are going to be the steps to isolate, the steps to solving any absolute value equation. Step 1 is to isolate the absolute value on one side of the equal sign. Step 2 is to set up the positive and the negative situations. And this is what I explained. How do you do the positive situation? Write it exactly the way it is without the absolute value sticks. How do you do the negative situation? Write it the same equation as the positive situation, but change the right side to a negative value. Okay? And then step 3, solve each one. So let's start with something really simple. Let's say we had the absolute value of x plus 1 equals, give me a number. 4. Okay. So step 1 says isolate the absolute value on one side of the equation. So here's the absolute value. Is it by itself on the left side of the equal sign, or do I have a 2 out in front, or do I have a plus 5 at the end? Isn't this absolute value by itself on the left side of the equal sign? Yes. So step 1 is done for us. As a matter of fact, on today's complete homework assignment, they're all going to be done for us. They're all going to be isolated. So step 1 is insignificant. Okay? We're all going to move on to step 2, set up the positive and the negative situations. Okay? So when I solve an absolute value equation, I actually write pos, I write neg, I underline them, I put a squiggly line between them, and then I show my work. Now, how do I find the positive situation? It says right here, write it exactly the way it is without the absolute value sticks. So, what am I going to write on the positive situation? X plus 1 equals 4. Yay? Okay. How about the negative situation? What do I do on that one? It says over here in the notes, write the same equation as a positive situation, but change the right side to a negative value. So the same thing as a positive, x plus 1 equals 4, but I change the right side to a negative value. So I put a negative 4 instead of a 4. Does that make sense? And step 3, as you can see on the instructions, it says solve each equation. All right, so let's solve both of them. Subtract 1, x is by itself, x equals 3. That is one answer. Subtract 1, you're going to have x equaling negative 5. And that's another answer. So we actually have two answers to this absolute value equation. There's an answer for the positive situation. All I did was rewrite it exactly the way it is without the sticks. That's what I have down here. Then the negative situation, same thing, but slap a negative right onto that number on the right side. So put a negative, that's a negative situation. You solve both, you're going to get two different answers. As you could see, if you were to take the 3 and plug it in to the original absolute value equation, what's 3 plus 1? And what is the absolute value of 4? It's 4, isn't it? Okay, so that definitely works. Now let's take the negative 5. Take negative 5, plug it right in here. What's negative 5 plus 1? negative 4, and the absolute value of negative 4 is positive 4. So as you can see, both of these answers work. There's actually two answers, and you need both of them to get full credit. You need both the positive situation answer and the negative situation answer to get full credit on these absolute value equations. Okay? So all of the ones we're going to be seeing today are going to be this simple, where the absolute value is already isolated. All you have to do is set up the positive situation and the negative situation. So at this moment, I want to give you guys more time to actually copy down these steps exactly as I have them here. Step 1 is to isolate the absolute value on one side of the equal sign. Step 2 is to set up the pos and the neg situations. And I always do it positive underlined, negative underlined, squiggly line between them. And over here in red, it describes how to do the positive situation. You write it exactly the way it is without the absolute value sticks. The negative situation, write the same equation as the positive situation, same thing you have over here, but change the right side to a negative value. Okay, so change it to a negative on the right side. And then step 3 is to solve each equation. So let me give you guys, if you're at home watching this for the first time, hit pause, copy this down as notes in your notebook today. I want to hit pause right here in class, give you guys a couple of minutes to copy it down. So I hope that you guys finished copying that down. I want to look at one that's a little more complicated. Check out that absolute value equation. Now let's go ahead and jot that down in your notebooks. 2 on the outside, absolute value of 2x minus 3, that's on the inside of the absolute values, minus 1 on the outside, and then equals 13. So step 1 on the notes that you just jotted down is to isolate the absolute value on one side of the equal sign. So you want to get this absolute value by itself on the left side of the equal sign. Imagine if it were a big giant X, all right? So imagine, let me actually do this. Imagine that right there is a big giant X. Let's pretend that it said 2x minus 1 equals 13. What would you do to solve for x? What would you do to solve for x? You would get rid of the minus 1 on both sides, right? So you're going to go plus 1, and you would now have 2 giant X equals 14, right? And then what would you do after that? You would divide by 2, and you'd get X equals 7. Yay? Yay. That's how you would do it if it were a regular equation, but it's not a regular equation, it's an absolute value equation. So let's isolate that giant X. Again, we are going to subtract 1 or add 1. You're going to have 2 absolute value 2x minus 3 equals what? 14. And now we need to recognize that says 2 times the absolute value, so we're going to get rid of the multiplication of 2 by dividing by 2. What you do to one side, you must do to the other. And now you truly do have the absolute value of 2x minus 3 isolated on the left side, equaling what? 7. So ladies and gentlemen, that was step 1. We're not even going to have to do anything complicated like this on today's homework, but in the next couple of weeks we will. So might as well talk about it now. So this is the isolated absolute value on the left side. And now after that, you look at step 2. Step 2 is to set up your positive and negative situations, right? The positive situation exactly the way it is without the absolute value sticks. The negative situation is the same thing, but slap a negative on the right-hand side. So let's all do this together. Put pos, neg, underline, squiggly line. Positive situation. How do I write that? Positive situation. What do I write for the positive situation? 2x minus 3 equals 7, right? Yeah. No absolute value sticks. All you do is copy it exactly the way it is without these guys. Okay, there it is. Perfect. The negative situation, same exact thing. 2x minus 3, but it's what? Negative 7. Perfect. You guys know this. Okay. So that was step 2. And now step 3, solve both of them and you're done. So it's like doing two problems. On the left side, I'm going to go plus 3 to get rid of the minus 3. What I do to one side, I do to the other, plus 3. My new equation is 2x equaling 10. Final step, divide by 2, x equals 5. There's one answer for the positive situation. That means that the negative situation answer is x equals negative 5, right? Wrong. No, it's something totally different. You got to work it out, right? You don't know the answer. You have to actually work out the negative situation. So let's do that. Let's go to that negative 3 and go plus 3 to get rid of it. What you do to one side, you do to the other, plus 3 over here. Let me rewrite it. I have a 2x on the left side, the equal sign. Negative 7 plus 3 is negative 4. Final step is to divide by 2. X equals negative 2. Ladies and gentlemen, there are two answers to the original equation, and it's 5 and negative 2. Both 5 and negative 2. Both answers are correct. You need both to get full credit. If you only write one, it's going to be wrong. So if I were to go back to the original and plug in the number 5 right in there, it will work. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 minus 3 is 7. 7 times 2 is 14. 14 take away 1 really is 13. If I plug in the other answer, negative 2, it'll also work. Plug in negative 2 right here, it'll be 2 times negative 2, that's negative 4. Negative 4 minus 3 is negative 7. The absolute value of negative 7 is 7. And then 2 times 7 is 14, minus 1 is 13. So both answers must be stated for you to get full credit. Okay, like I said, on the homework, it's going to be a lot easier. So here are the solutions to the homework. By the way, our homework assignment, we're going to be doing numbers 1 through 10 all, but we're going to do 11, 12, and 13 tomorrow, and 14. We're going to do that tomorrow. We're going to hold off one day on that last part. So don't cross it off. We're still going to do it tomorrow. But on the homework today, we're just going to do the first part, which is evaluating. All you do is plug it in. So they're going to tell you on the first part, by the way, this is the answer page, but they're going to tell you A is 2, B is negative 3, C is negative 4. So if you look at, like let's say number 2 right here, and we plug in the B value of negative 3, that's a negative 3 right in there, plus 1, and it's in absolute values, then plus 8, and you just do the math. All right, negative 3 plus 1, that is negative 2, but it's still in absolute values. And we already know that the absolute value of negative 2 is what? 2, and then plus 8, the answer is 10. So the first part, you just plug it in and work it out. But the second part is where they actually ask you to solve each equation. All right, so these are the answers, but all you're going to do, since they're already isolated, there is no other value like a 2 out here that you need to divide by. There's no plus 5 after it. It's just the absolute value of W plus 1 equals 5. All you are going to do on this homework assignment is do this. Pause, neg, squiggly line. Positive situation, exactly the way it is. W plus 1 equals 5. Negative situation, same thing. W plus 1 equals, but negative 5 is correct. And then you solve both and you get your two answers, right? Look, minus 1, W equals 4, that's one answer. Minus 1, W equals negative 6, that's another answer. Easy. I just need those both answers. And they also want you to graph them, right? So on your graph that they give you right here, you just put the negative 6, put a dot right there, positive 4, put a dot right there. And we will wait till the final 4 questions to work on the final 4 tomorrow. So again, number 11, 12, 13, 14, we're going to work on tomorrow. I hope this video helps.